This is John Baldock's 2004 book, The Essence of Sufism. It's on an Eagle Editions book. It's a publisher that I'm unfamiliar with, a writer that I'm unfamiliar with, and a topic that I was unfamiliar with. It was quite an interesting read, just for the amount that I was able to discover from this. Like any good guide, it's a diving board, let's say, that will help you launch into the swimming pool below, the waters that contain so much more. The Sufis were kind of the mystic branch of Islam. So we have a background first of Islam. We learn about Muhammad, the Quran, the foundations of the religion, all things that I knew a little bit about, but certainly not enough given what's going on in the world these days. I think that an understanding of the major religions is rather important. It's not enough to think that you know one, to say that you know enough of anything. So the first part of the book is given over to this background information, the foundations that you need if you want to go further. And then in part two, he looks at the writings of the Sufis. The Sufis themselves were noted for their storytelling abilities. So here I'm introduced really for the first time to that classic, The Conference of the Birds by Attar, the treatise on being by Ibn Arabi, the Mathnawi by Rumi, and The Secret Rose Garden by Shapistari. All stories that I knew very little about, in fact nothing for the most part. And yet now I feel a little bit better educated. I know more about the culture connected with Sufism and Islam generally. And I think there's a great story at the start, which is about Mulla Nasruddin, Mulla of course being a religious teacher. It's a fantastic little story that you wish we heard more of in the press and the media these days when we talk about Islam, because there's a certain amount of wisdom here that is otherwise missing from the discourse today. I'll read this because I think it's quite important. So, one day the villagers thought they would play a joke on Nasruddin. As he was supposed to be a holy man of some indefinable sort, they went to him and asked him to preach a sermon in their mosque. He agreed. When the day came, Nasruddin mounted the pulpit and spoke. "O people, do you know what I'm going to tell you?" "No, we do not," they cried. "Until you know, I cannot say. You're too ignorant to make a start on," said the mullah, overcome with indignation that such ignorant people should waste his time. He descended from the pulpit and went home. Slightly chagrined, the deputation went to his house again and asked him to preach the following Friday, the day of prayer. Nasruddin started his sermon with the same question as before. This time the congregation answered as one man, "Yes, we know." "In that case," said the mullah, "there's no need for me to detain you longer. You may go." And he returned home. Having been prevailed upon to preach for the third Friday in succession, he started his address as before. "Do you know or do you not?" The congregation was ready. "Some of us do, and others do not." "Excellent," said Nasruddin. "Then let those who know communicate their knowledge to those who do not." And he went home. So this was taken from Idris Shah's book, The Exploits of the Incomparable Mulla Nasruddin. Another book that I would quite like to get my hands on, actually. It's a very wise little story, very insightful and enlightening, and in a way relates to my own profession, which is that of teaching and education, in that if people have no education to begin with, there's not much you can do, and you can try your best. But the best situation is when some people know something, others don't, and you get them to share their knowledge, their wisdom. Because it turns out that even people who think they know nothing, who think they are ignorant of everything, actually do know something. And it's something that they can share, and in the act of sharing, they'll learn quite a lot about other people. So I'm glad that I read this. I'm thankful to John Baldock for sharing what he knew with somebody who knew nothing, myself. Overall, it's a good book. It gets a little bit bogged down with these long passages that are just quotes from other books. It would be sometimes better to read the original. Sometimes he reduces himself to simply quoting the titles of chapters in a book. So for example, he's looking at the Fusus al-Hikam, and he has things like the divine wisdom in the word of Adam, the wisdom of the divine inspiration in the word of Seth. A long list like this, as you can see. This sort of thing kind of, I don't know, reduces the appeal of the book slightly. Otherwise, well worth a look if you're curious about this topic, as I was, and I'm going to give it 3 stars out of 5.